They called us primitive. The first report came from High Observer Trishek of the Zenthri Dominion, a cold-blooded strategist who'd catalogued over 92 planetary conquests. In his preliminary assessment of Earth, he wrote, "The dominant species displays erratic patterns of thought, inconsistent governance, and self-destructive tendencies. Minimal threat level. However, their biological resilience is statistically anomalous." That word, anomalous, was the closest thing to fear his species could express. I was there on the command vessel Vernax Edge, orbiting silently above the swirling blues and greens of Earth, watching the first scans scroll across translucent displays. They lived in disorganized hives, cities, they called them. They flooded and fought and festered in clusters of noise and pollution, and still they thrived. Disease didn't break them. Famine didn't stop them. Even their own weapons, capable of planetary destruction, had not erased them. They survived everything. But survival wasn't the concern. What worried us, though no one would admit it yet, was how they survived. The first contact initiative was surgical. A squad of Zenthri abductors descended cloaked, capturing 3 humans from different continents. A soldier from a desert war zone. A tribal hunter from deep forest. A suburban teenager from a plastic-wrapped neighborhood. None reacted the way we'd modeled. The teenager tried to choke one of the scientists with his own feeding tube. The hunter chewed through synthetic restraints and smeared blood across our senses to blind them. The soldier, his name was Elias Vaughn, didn't speak for hours. Just stared, still as death. We thought he was catatonic. Then he bit off his own thumb to slip free of the magnetic cuffs and used the exposed bone to rupture a guard's throat sac. He bled for 10 minutes before collapsing. He never screamed. When we revived him for interrogation, he only asked one thing: "How many of you are there?" That question unsettled even Trishek. It wasn't fear. It wasn't desperation. It was assessment. Calculation. "I recommend accelerated suppression," Trishek said later, pacing before the command core. "Shock display. Orbital annihilation of one major city. Demonstrates superiority." We protested. It was premature. Reckless. Earth was valuable. Its ecosystems were chaotic, but rich. Its gravity tolerable. Its atmosphere unfiltered and nourishing. But the Dominion didn't value subtlety. They valued compliance. So they destroyed Sao Paulo. Clean vaporization. 10 million gone in a blink. The human response wasn't panic. It wasn't surrender. It was a silence that stretched across the globe. No public broadcast. No attempt at diplomacy. Then, 5 hours later, we began losing satellites. One after another, Earth's orbital network, their obsolete tech, came alive with purpose. They hijacked our low-frequency channels with a transmission from an old satellite repurposed as a relay. The image was grainy, shaky. It was Elias Vaughn. His face blooded, missing the thumb he'd sacrificed, one eye swollen shut. "Congratulations," he said. "You just made it personal." Then the signal cut, and 2 of our cloaked drones exploded over the Arctic. Our own devices, reprogrammed by something we didn't see coming. Not AIS. Not logic systems. Just raw, chaotic human ingenuity wrapped in duct tape and vengeance. They weren't running. They were hunting. And worse, they were learning. 1 week later, the first jungle patrol went dark. We sent a retrieval team into the Amazon basin. Only 2 returned. One was missing half his limbs and kept muttering something unintelligible, eyes in the dark, laughing, not machines. The other was silent. Until we decoded his last personal log. They used sound to mislead. Trees to strike. Fire to trap. I watched one eat a raw snake before spearing Julek through the eye. No hesitation. No honor. Just purpose. This wasn't war. This was survival, weaponized. They used everything: mud to block thermal scans, broken glass to blind optics, animal carcasses rigged with explosives. We couldn't predict them because they didn't follow rules. They didn't try to win. They tried to break us. It was working. Back on the Vernax Edge, Trishek stared at Earth's surface through the observation dome. They lack unity. They war with themselves, he muttered. Yet they adapt as if one mind fuels them. He wasn't wrong. Something primal threaded through their disconnected responses. Some instinct deeper than species or language. Not patriotism. Not nationalism. Something older. Predation. I remember the moment I began to fear them, not when they destroyed one of our forward bases, not even when their hacked weather drones summoned a storm to drown our supply columns. No. It was when we intercepted another transmission. It wasn't a warning. It was music. Somehow, they'd patched our network with a human song. Thundering drums. Screaming vocals. Something called death metal. Accompanied by a crude human drawing of our high warlord being eaten by a bear. It made no sense. But it terrified us because it meant they weren't just surviving. They were enjoying the hunt. Trishek convened a meeting that night. This cannot continue. We must crush them completely or retreat. But we must not linger. Every day we stay, they become more dangerous. Too late. One of our ships exploded in low orbit. We assumed sabotage. But there were no infiltrators. No breaches. Just a trail of retrofitted missiles, human-built, alien-modified, launched from a hidden launch pad in Antarctica, of all places. They'd reverse-engineered our own tech. In 2 weeks. We were no longer observing a primitive world. We were staring into a mirror held by something more terrifying than any AI. A species that refused to be prey. Trishek's last order before leaving orbit echoed through the halls of the ship: initiate full withdrawal. Mark the planet as red-level threat. Leave a warning beacon. The file attached to that beacon was a single, encrypted sentence. This is why humans are apex predators. They deployed the Nightfangs next. Elite Zen-3 predators, bio-enhanced, exo-armored, sensory-augmented hunters bred for perfect stealth and surgical violence. In over 100 campaigns across the Spiral Arm, not a single Nightfang unit had failed. But Earth didn't obey tradition. The planet itself felt hostile. Alive, almost. Hot. Swampy. Loud with insect drone and humid rot. The Amazon canopy was a labyrinth of shadows and venom, and it swallowed them whole. The squad's feed streamed into the Vernax edge in real time. Static jittered with bursts of motion, green eyes in the dark, a rustle of movement too fast for senses. Then silence. The commander, Threnza, reported her location before the line cut. We are surrounded. We don't see them, but they see us. They are hunting us. That was the last we heard. 6 bodies were found a week later, what remained of them. Stripped of armor, flesh flayed with crude metal. No blaster burns. No energy wounds. Just bone, stone, and heat. Spears. Fire. Teeth. Some of them had bite marks, human ones. We didn't understand. We had underestimated their brutality, yes, but this wasn't just retaliation. This was ritual. And worse, they didn't fear us. Not even when we sent down firestorms, plasma bombardments over 3 major forests and a coastal city. The flames swallowed green and concrete alike. We silenced over 500,000 human lives in 2 hours. They responded by poisoning the rivers we drank from. They released a hybrid fungus into our ration farms, something natural, twisted into something monstrous. Our digestion systems rejected it violently. Soldiers began hallucinating. Some tried to claw their eyes out. That was when Trishek stopped speaking in commands and started whispering to himself. This planet, it's not a battlefield. It's a crucible. Down on the surface, a counterforce had formed. Not a government or army, nothing that neat. They were survivors. Hunters. Engineers. Hackers. Madmen. They didn't follow a chain of command. They were the chain. Elias Vaughn led them. We intercepted a visual of him, scarred, gaunt, a dozen alien implants grafted into his frame. He walked in front of a firelit crowd, holding one of our rifles like a club. His voice was hoarse, but it carried through the translators we hijacked. They thought we were chaos. They thought we were soft. Let's show them what forged us. His people answered with howls. They struck our Arctic station next. Not with airships or energy cannons, but with a weaponized virus, frozen in the permafrost and somehow reactivated. It spread through touch. Through breath. Our immune dampeners failed instantly. Over 100 dead in 48 hours. Then came the psychological warfare. They hijacked our sleep cycles. Beamed human laughter through low-band frequencies into our quarters. Sometimes we'd wake to screams, sometimes music, sometimes just silence, far too complete. Officers began self-terminating. One carved human letters into his own chest, "Run." The worst came not from machines but minds. One of their captured field agents, female, mid-30s, unarmed, was brought aboard for interrogation. She called herself Mara. Said nothing for days. Ate in silence. Slept with her eyes open. Then she asked for a chessboard. We gave her one. She played against our tactical AI, beat it in 17 moves. We reset the parameters. She beat it again. 12 moves. Do you know why you're losing? She asked the watching officers. Because you're trying to win. That's the problem. She leaned forward. We're not trying to win. We're just trying to make sure you lose worse. After that, the AI refused further matches. It classified her as a non-linear threat. And she hadn't even stood up. We tried to break her. Sensory deprivation. Neural scrambles. Threats. Promises. She smiled. You don't understand what we are, she whispered. We've fought gods. We've survived ourselves. Even Trishek looked away. By the second month, our supply chains had collapsed. Half our officers were dead or missing. Our soldiers wouldn't leave the ships. The planet below felt haunted. Not by spirits, but by something colder, intent. Then came the recording. Elias again. A crude transmission, distorted and shaking. His face filled the screen, mask off, one eye replaced by our tech. We gave you a chance. You nuked our cities. You burned our forests. And still, here we are. He paused. We don't run. We adapt. Every time you hurt us, we learn to hurt harder. You thought we were apex predators because we conquered our planet. No. That's not it. He stepped back. Behind him stood a dozen figures, Mara included. Young, old, some barely human anymore, some covered in scars and tech. We're apex predators, he said, because we don't know when to stop. Transmission ended. Trishek stood in silence, his eyes fixed on Earth. Then, for the first time in recorded Dominion history, he issued a full withdrawal. No ceremony. No declaration. Just retreat. But he didn't make it home. 3 days into exoatmospheric ascent, a series of silent drones intercepted Vernak's edge. One exploded under the hull. Just one. It was enough. I watched the flames bloom across the viewport, watched our legacy shatter in red and gold. As the alarms screamed and the air thinned, I saw the planet turn slowly beneath us. Green. Blue. Alive. And waiting. They left a beacon behind. A cold, silver monolith anchored in lunar rock, broadcasting in every galactic tongue. Terra, quarantine zone. Level red. Do not engage. Do not return. The warning pulsed through space like a heartbeat. But the humans didn't dismantle it. They let it stand. They wanted it there. A year after the Zenthri fled, Earth was quiet. Not peaceful, never that, but focused. The smog had thinned, cities rebuilt in angular, hybrid architectures, part concrete, part alien alloy. Where forests once burned, biotechnicians seeded flora embedded with nanofiber root systems. Old nations dissolved. New syndicates, collectives, and warforged councils emerged, not bound by flag or creed, but by memory. By survival. At the center of it all stood Elias Vaughn. He was different now, leaner, colder, wrapped in modular armor that whispered when he moved. His left eye was a multispectral implant. His right hand, skeletal and blackened with alien circuitry, still bore the scar where he had once bit off his own thumb. People called him Commander. Some called him Revenant. He rarely spoke. But when he did, they listened. Above Earth, a new station spun, the Aegis, built from the gutted remains of the Zenthri wreckage. Humanity's first off-world citadel. Its engines, reverse-engineered from Dominion tech, purred like beasts waiting to hunt. In one of its command wings, Mara sat at the console, watching the stars. "They're out there," she said one night. "Watching. Waiting to see if we'll stay caged." Elias stood behind her, silent. Then came the signal. Not from Earth. Not from any known Dominion frequency. It was faint. Fragmented. A distress call, Zenthri in origin, but corrupted. Embedded in the code was something else. A request for asylum. Not to Earth, but to humans. Dominion collapse. Mara asked, raising an eyebrow. Elias nodded. Or a trap. He didn't care which. 2 days later, the first human fleet left orbit. Not exploratory. Not diplomatic. Predatory. 5 ships, each named after Earth's old monsters, Leviathan, Manticore, Wendigo, Chimera, and Vaughn's own, Cerberus. They didn't fly flags. They carried no anthem. Only a message, etched into the hull of every vessel in English, Mandarin, Arabic, and Zenthri glyphs. We remember. Their first destination was a system once occupied by the Dominion, a barren moon with a refueling station. The outpost hailed them upon approach. No weapons. No threats. Just a voice trembling in static, "We're survivors. Please, we're not your enemy." Vaughn responded himself. "You were on Earth." A pause. "Yes. I was maintenance. I never." "You saw Sao Paulo." Silence. "We didn't pull the trigger," the voice whispered. "You didn't stop the ones who did." A single kinetic round left Cerberus and cored the outpost like an apple. Mara didn't flinch. "You think they'll unite against us again?" "They will," Elias said. "Eventually. But not yet. Right now, they are scattered. Afraid. They should be." Back on Earth, the children no longer learned about borders. They learned about biology. Warfare. History unfiltered. Every student knew what an orbital burn looked like. Every 10-year-old could name the cities that no longer existed, and why. The planet had stopped waiting to be saved. It had decided to become the threat. The Zenthri archives, those that survived, called it the shift. Not just a change in power, but in classification. Humanity was no longer labeled Type 0 sentience. They were reclassified, apex origin predators. It wasn't a compliment. It was a warning. One such archive was hidden deep beneath the ruins of the Dominion's capital world, a vault buried in glass stone. There, a lone scholar, six-limbed and trembling, transcribed the last recovered audio from the Earth campaign. He listened to Elias's old transmissions again and again. They terrified him. Not because of the words, but because of the tone. There was no malice. No gloating. Just purpose. As if violence had become a tool as natural as breathing. He added his own log at the end. "We assumed logic prevailed. That the cold clarity of technology ensured dominance. But the humans..." A pause. "They didn't just evolve. They chose their madness. Honed it. Wrapped it around their species like armor." He placed the file in stasis and sealed the vault. He did not transmit it. He knew it was already too late. Because somewhere, beyond the edge of charted space, a human ship was en route. Not by map. Not by signal. But by scent. Back aboard Cerberus, Elias sat alone in his quarters, watching Earth rotate slowly on a holoscreen. Below him, the cradle spun, scarred, radiant, relentless. He touched the scar on his chest. They had called it a primitive planet. Now it was something else. A forge. And what came out of it was no longer merely human. The Outer Rim station had been silent for 43 days. Orbiting a red dwarf on the edge of known space, it once belonged to the Zenthri Dominion, long abandoned after the war. Now, it pulsed faintly with life again. Someone, or something, had reactivated its deep space beacon. No message, no code, just a ping. Intermittent. Deliberate. Cerberus changed course. Elias Vaughn stood on the bridge as the signal came into range. Behind him, Mara adjusted the spectral filters, her fingers flicking across the console like a pianist. "It's not a distress call," she murmured. "It's a breadcrumb." Elias didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the holographic display. The station was small, barely the size of a civilian hub, but the signal was drawing power from something far beneath its core. Not Dominion tech. Something older. When the docking clamps engaged, the crew held their breath. No signs of heat. No movement. But they knew better than to trust silence. That had been Earth's first mistake with the Dominion, confusing absence for mercy. Elias led the entry team, Mara at his side, and 3 X-Recon operatives behind them, each outfitted in hybrid armor, each carrying weapons designed for creatures not yet catalogued. The doors hissed open with a moan that sounded too much like breathing. Inside, the station was cold. Bone-white walls stretched in eerie symmetry, smeared with handprints, some human, some not. Lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows where there should have been none. "It's recent," Mara whispered, kneeling to examine the floor. "Too recent." They found the first body in the reactor corridor. A Zenthri, half disintegrated, one hand still gripping a data slate. Carved into the wall beside it were 6 words in shaky Zenthri glyphs. "Do not follow the human signal." Elias took the slate, tapped the cracked surface. It played a fragmented recording, grainy footage of something moving through the station. Not fast. Not loud. But wrong. It was humanoid, but its limbs bent at unnatural angles, and its eyes were mirrors. The feed cut out just as the creature turned toward the camera. Mara inhaled sharply. "That's not one of ours." "No," Elias said flatly. "But it used to be." They pressed on. In the station's lower levels, they found evidence of research. Not Dominion, Terran. Labels written in English, old Earth-style touchscreens repurposed with alien conduits. Notes describing behavioral studies. Pain thresholds. Evolution under stress. Elias scanned the final page in the logbook. The signature read, "Dr. Amina Rezad, Project Overturn." Mara stepped closer. "I thought she died in Sao Paulo." "She did," Elias said. "Or she was supposed to." Then the lights died. In the pitch dark, the air grew heavy, thick with the metallic tang of ozone and something deeper. Decay. The team's visors flickered, systems glitching. "EMP?" one of the Recon soldiers asked. "No," Elias said, drawing his blade. "Something more intimate." Movement echoed from the vents, skittering, wet. Then silence. When the emergency lights snapped on, 2 soldiers were missing. No scream. No struggle. Just gone. They pulled back toward the upper decks, weapons drawn. But as they ascended, they realized the station had changed. The corridor layout had shifted. The doors were wrong. The air smelled like Earth after a storm, hot, electric, waiting for violence. They were no longer in a station. They were in a trap built to think like them. Mara scanned the walls. "It's copying us. Learning." Elias didn't hesitate. He activated his comms. "Protocol EOS. Burn everything. No survivors. Not even us." The voice on the other end, grim and steady, responded, "Understood." Mara's eyes widened. "You're sure it's that bad?" "It's not a thing," Elias said. "It's an echo. Of us." The creature appeared in the command chamber, tall, human-shaped, but hollow. Its voice was soft. "Why do you run from yourselves?" it asked. No one answered. It stepped forward, arms outstretched, not in attack, but in invitation. Elias shot it through the throat. It didn't fall. It smiled. And then the walls screamed. The team ran. Fire burst from vents. Gravity twisted. Hallways bent backwards. One by one, the soldiers were taken, pulled into walls, swallowed by light. Only Elias and Mara made it to the exit hatch. Outside, Cerberus hovered. Inside, something followed. Elias pushed Mara through the ducking tube, then sealed the gate behind her. She screamed, pounded the hatch. Don't. It remembers pain, Elias said, meeting her eyes. It learned from me. It is me. Mara shouted, begged. But he didn't move. The last thing she saw was him turning, blade in hand, walking into the dark. The moment she stepped back aboard Cerberus, the station exploded. Not a fireball. Not debris. Just light, searing white, then gone, like it had never existed. Back on Earth, weeks later, a new report came in. Another signal. Different coordinates. Different voice. But the message was identical. Just a whisper. Why do you run from yourselves? And this time, it came from within the solar system.